community commits a disproportionate amount of crimes compared to the white community. Let me tell you, 6% of the population, right? Black men, 6% of the population.
She using my numbers. Candace be watching me. Candace be watching me. You know you watch me, Candace. You're using my numbers. You're not using them right. You're using them for evil, but you're using my numbers. You're just using them for evil.
Account for 44% of all murders in this country, according to 2018 statistics. That is what you call a gap.
Video! Did I just see a statistic?
And black people represent just 13% of the population. It doesn't matter what percentage of the population you represent. It matters what percentage of the violent criminal community you represent. And unfortunately, black community commits a disproportionate amount of crimes compared to the white community. Let me tell you, 6% of the population, right? Black men.
That's black men. Yeah, black men.
6% of the population account for 44% of all murders in this country, according to 2018 statistics. That is what you call a gap. And yet white people who represent 60% of the population, we represent 13, black men are 6%, only represent 50% of all the murders, right?
I like how this video was supposed to be about how George Floyd wasn't a good person, and I skip ahead like 8 minutes, and now we're just listening to white supremacist arguments. I can't believe I have to repeat this, but first of all, it doesn't make much sense to select for black men because men disproportionately commit violent crimes across the board. If we eliminated all men from society, violent crimes would plummet to like less than 1/10 of what they are now. So we'll stick to just the black population rather than black men, because otherwise we would have to all... Notice how she chose black men, but she also chose white people, including the much less comparatively violent white women in the statistic to make the disparity look even more severe. Just a nice little bit of dishonesty, the kind of thing you would engage in if you were specifically interested in making black people look violent. Second of all, that data is not even actually accurate. Those are for arrests, not convictions. Since we know for a fact that black people are massively disproportionately arrested over white people, it doesn't really make much sense to use that as an indicator of their relative levels of criminality. If we go by conviction rates, it's probably a little bit closer to 13 to 36%. And then if you control for socioeconomic status, those numbers get flown down even closer because it turns out black people are on average much poorer than white people. And then if you take a look at that and control for environment, considering the fact that, for example, black people are much less likely to have both parents, black people are much less likely to have had good education, black people are much less likely to have had access to good business opportunities after they're old enough to work, and then, wow, those numbers start to get really close to each other. But then, if you control for specific groups of blacks that are responsible for the vast amount of violent crime that comes out of that racial community, that is to say, crime related to gang warfare, which pertains to the drug war in this country, if you get rid of that as well, meaning we're actually just looking at race as a comparison and not a bunch of conflating socioeconomic factors, we achieve parity. Or very close to parity. Black people are still subject to racism, which does lend itself towards a lot of harmful conditions socioeconomically. You can't actually control for everything perfectly. Crime studies and criminology are very, very difficult fields of studies for those reasons. And this is a fact. And this is, by the way, the reason why sociologists and criminologists tend to be very left-leaning. You don't actually see a bunch of criminologists and criminal justice studies majors coming out of university talking about how, like, we just need to be harder on crime, like, black communities got bad culture. They don't really do that. And there's a reason for that. Because if you're educated on these subjects, you recognize that the disparity can be chalked up far more to conditions comorbid with the long-term oppression of black people than the actual state of their blackness or their culture, whatever nebulous bullshit that means. I don't know if you've noticed recently all that gangsta rap that encourages people to be mean to their parents and do drugs or whatever. You know where that's most popular? Really, I want you guys to ask. Where is that most popular? The gangsta rap. Where is that really hippin' and hoppin'? Because let me tell you, it's not fucking black people. It's white people in the suburbs. Weird. And you know who's commissioning that music from the gangsta rap artists? white production executives. Black people and their art being commodified from blacks to sell to whites. Not the first time it's happened, believe it or not. If you follow the history of music, this would actually be the millionth time that it's happened. So black culture clearly isn't the answer here because it's being, in large part, commissioned by white people and consumed by white people. If black culture and the hippin' and hoppin' music makes people violent, why the fuck aren't all these white kids in the suburbs freaking out? I guess they do a lot of school shootings. Maybe we can do some research on that. The issue is that while all of this may be, this is everything I've said so far, this isn't like sneaky debate tactics. This is a very logical understanding, a very straightforward understanding of the way in which our crime system works. I don't know who TA is, but you can email me. It's a very, very, very straightforward understanding of how our system works. But when people like Aunt Tom Candace Owens over here just start going like, there's a problem in the black community, 1350, what she's doing is reinforce, without any sociological analysis, what she's doing is reaffirming to our audience that there's something wrong with black people. Black people. Not black socioeconomic circumstances, not black cultural conditions, black people. That is why people say 1350. Because you'll notice, and I guarantee you, this is going to be the case here, they don't suggest socioeconomic solutions after saying 1350. You guys have been online for a while. You ever seen that? Has someone ever said 1350? Now here's what I think we can do to fix that. If we invest in the educational centers in these areas, we can. Have you ever seen somebody do that? Ever in your life? Nope. They say 1350, they smirk, and they walk away. They don't want solutions because they're not trying to point out this problem to find a solution. They're pointing it out to reinforce the perceived inferiority of black people. And Candace Owens, a wealthy grifter who admits she has no emotional tie to her positions, caters to this collection of white supremacists because Candace Owens is, and she looks kind of the part right now, a little bit like a Halloween mask, a subhuman monster, a piece of shit who feeds on the racial
And yet white people who represent 60%.
Me, you know you watch me, Candace. You're using my numbers. You're not using them right. You use
disparities in this country and profits from the suffering, who bolsters through her skin tone the perspectives of people who would see her put into the dirt. And she's fine, because she's got the money and she's on the right side. The term for this, she invoked the Jews before I did. The term for this, if I remember correctly, was Judenrat. Wasn't that it? Back during the Holocaust? The good Jews. The ones who worked with the Nazi state to turn in their pals so they could live a little while longer. The ones who would carry the corpses to the crematorium so they could be given slightly more bread the next day. People like this have existed throughout history, but not many of them get to make as much money as Candace has.
That makes no sense. That makes no sense. A 6-point variation in a community where we are extreme minorities. We commit 50% of all violent offenses, evenly split, and we're only 13% of the population, okay? So we have a lot more encounters with police officers. And don't say the police officers are coming around because we're black. I'm talking about violent criminals. I'm talking about murder. 44% of murders, okay? You are...
Notice how she's not bringing up any solutions. She's just saying it. She's just throwing it out there. Imagine hating your own race. Well, she doesn't actually hate her own race. I don't actually think that Candace Owens hates black people. I think Candace Owens just knows the best paychecks come from white supremacists.
I want to talk about real statistics. The police officers have way more to be fearful of in the black community than the other way around, okay? We commit, on average, a police officer is 18 and a half times more likely to be killed by a black person than the other way around, okay? So this entire...
I want to see data on that. 18 and a half times more likely for a cop to be killed by a black person than the other way around. Number of people shot to death by the police in the United States from 2017 to 2020 by race. Okay. For black folks, it looks like we're getting about 200 a year. So if there's 18 times more likely, that would mean that how many police officers would have to die to black people every year? About a little bit less than 4,000. An average of 85 law enforcement officers were feloniously killed per year. 85 law enforcement officers per year, and not just by black people. A total of 106 during 2017. Where did she get this data from? Where did she get this data from? Even if we were to be charitable and say about 100 police officers lose their lives on duty every year, because we're only tracking police officers who die on duty, not police officers who choke to death on a fucking donut. About 100 of them die every year, but about 200 black men are shot by the police every year. And that's just 100 police officers, not even just by race. But there are more black than police? Yeah, no shit, but then you could do the same stat with any racial group. If there are more black men than police, then you could do the same shit with any racial group, because obviously the numbers will be disproportionate. 5 statistics you need to know about cops killing blacks. From the Daily Wire. My favorite. Cops killed twice as many whites as blacks in 2015. Oh, but there are more but there are more than twice as many white people than black people, so that's still disproportionate. More whites and Hispanics die from police homicides than blacks. That's literally the exact same stat as up here, except rephrased. No shit, black people are a minority in the community. The Post data does show that unarmed black men are more likely to die by the gun of a cop than an unarmed white man, but this does not tell the whole story. Yeah, okay, so you've got some other weird data that you think conflates that. Black and Hispanic police officers are more likely to fire a gun at blacks than white officers. Yeah, no shit, because black and Hispanic officers are more common in areas that have a high black population. And here we go. This is insane, by the way. How I can just read these titles and know how they're wrong. Blacks are more likely to kill cops than be killed by cops. This is according to FBI data, which also found that 40% of cop killers are black. According to MacDonald, the police officer is 18.5 times more likely to be killed by a black than a cop killing an unarmed black person. Wait, how? If 40% of cop killers are black, that means about 40 police officers would have died to black people every single year. If about 100 cops die every year, on average it's actually around 80, and 40% of them are black, that would mean that 40%, that about 40 cops die to black people every year, but 200 black men die to there's no way. There's absolutely no way. Yeah, Google cops 40% to learn more about this. There is literally no way. This is blatantly incorrect. There's a reason why we have this unrelated piece of information, and then they just say, according to MacDonald. Like, okay, can I get the data on that, maybe? Any methodology? So she's just repeating, like, presumably a lie from a Daily Wire article. Okay, just wanted to make sure. I suspected that everything that she just said was dishonest, but I wanted to confirm, just wanted to make sure. The math just does not add up in her favor. Are you looking at unarmed black men or total blacks killed by cops? That might be why, Vaush. It looks like about the number here. How many unarmed black men die a year to police? It looks like about half of the black men who die from police shootings were unarmed at the time. So about half were armed and about half were unarmed. But then, we're not even close to discussing the actual extent of abuse done to black people by the police. What about people who die during incarceration? What about people who die in prison due to mistreatment? Like, This isn't even the totality of the data. There's no justification for this false data point that she has thrown out. Hey, I don't know normally like edit anything after I'm done making the video, but it can be really, really difficult to fact check data live. And I didn't do the best job with the 18.5 times statistic, the one where it says a cop is 18.5 times more likely to be killed by a black man than a black man is to be killed by a cop. However, immediately after stream, I was given an article on that exact data point. It is horribly abused. It's just wrong. It's factually incorrect. It is data abuse of the worst possible order. It is incredibly irresponsible, and it was made with a racial bias. I found an excellent article that explains why, and using the exact same data manipulation, they were able to find that for white people, a police officer is 165 times more likely to be killed by a white man than an unarmed white man is to be killed by a cop. 165 times. So if you fuck with data, you can get any answer. Dishonest little fucking cunt.
Narrative is complete smoke and mirrors. It's all made up. It's just election fodder. It's white versus black because it's an election year.
There's no race war going on right now. The BLM protesters are not protesting against white people. There are white protesters and black cops. This is not a race war. You want it to be a race war because that makes it look better for you.
Not because black Americans are suffering at the hands of police officers more than white Americans. Do some police officers do the wrong thing? Yes. I don't think there's anybody in the world who has not encountered a police officer and thought this person is an absolute jerk who is power tripping, whether you are black or white. We know they exist. And we know they're always going to exist, by the way, because they're human beings. And sometimes human beings suck. In fact, if you...
There's the reductive analysis of the conservative. Yeah, sometimes they're bad because people are bad. Very, very convincing rebuttal right there. Very good.
If you want to attack a community for accidental slayings or brutality, did you know that doctors accidentally kill 250,000 people every year because of mistakes?
Do they accidentally kill people due to racial bias, or do they accidentally kill people because surgeries are extremely difficult and there's never a guarantee of them succeeding? Very big brain. So a police officer murdering a person for no reason is exactly the same as a surgeon attempting a risky operation and the patient dying during the surgery.
Do you know that there's been doctors that have been arrested for being serial killers that just were killing people because they wanted to? Well,
good thing individual serial killers aren't acting with the endorsement of the state the way police officers are. Are they? I'm so tired of the conservative arguments, dude. I'm so exhausted by them. They're so stupid. Every single one of them is so fucking stupid. There's no logic to them. Just every every conceivable fucking bit you can throw out, any dumb fuck argument you can get to maybe sway a couple of people. Doesn't need to be consistent, true, logical. It doesn't even need to be a sound argument. The conclusion doesn't even need to follow from the premises. They'll just say it. It's just because their audience, that's the level they're at.
Protest and boycott doctors? Do we assume all... I mean, it's embarrassing. We are embarrassing in that regard.
I completely agree. I know she's talking about black people, and holy fuck, the level of Uncle Tomness right here. We blacks are so embarrassing. We're embarrassing. But I'll pretend she's talking about conservatives here.
Regard to scale to do the right thing, to be upstanding citizens. That is the call to action that I have for Black America with Brexit. Why do we
keep... and blaming the black community here. Yep.
Fulfilling this narrative? What do you think the perception of us, by the way, is on the outside? You ever look at the comments?
The majority of the people in America support the protests. 76% of Americans, including 71% of white people, called racism and discrimination a big problem in the US. That's a 26 percentage point spike since 2015, an insane jump in public support. In a poll, 57% of Americans said demonstrators' anger was fully justified, and 21% additionally said it was somewhat justified, meaning that condemnation of the riots is limited to an amount of people which is at most 22% of the population. And you know where that 22% is coming from? Candace Owens, sections? Your fucking comment section. Your sycophants. Your desperate little simps who lap up every racist fucking thing you say because they like hearing it from someone who's got a skin tone darker than theirs. That's where it's coming from. It is not coming from the average American. The average American, even most Republicans, I would be willing to wager, recognize there is something wrong with this country, recognize that the protests can be justified, or in fact are justified. You are the one who is inciting this condemnation of the black community. You are the one who is responsible in large part, to the greatest extent any one media figure can be, at least, to propagating this narrative that there's a problem in the black community that the blacks need to fix and they shouldn't be protesting till they get their shit together. You are the one selling them out. You have your knee on their neck. If it weren't for people like you, these numbers would be even higher.
Ever go into like an anonymous blog and see what people say? Oh, just black people being black people. I see those racist
Yeah, where do you think they're coming from, bitch? You think they're coming from our comment sections? You think they're coming from Democrats? You think they're coming from people on our side? Who do you think they're coming from? Who?
comments. Oh, just black people got to riot. Black people got to be black people. You know how they are. Oh, just black people being ignorant. That is the perception when people get to be anonymous and talk about us. That's what they think about us.
Yeah,
right?
and that's what I think about you. I think you're kind of fucking stupid. I don't think it has anything to do with your blackness, mind you. I don't think this is a racial condemnation. But yeah, I think you're kind of like pathetic. Like, and you probably have like some really weird like self-esteem issues that you're acting out. I hope your grifter bucks have bought you a comfortable bed, because I imagine it's the only way you could possibly sleep at night. And I do take some perverse satisfaction from knowing that no matter how good of a black girl you are to these people, the people who watch you and consume your content will only ever think of you as one of the good ones. They'll only ever think of you as one of the ones who managed to overcome your inferior genetics. A large portion of your community probably thinks of you as just like one of the, maybe an aberrant deviation from the general inferiority of the blacks, and that's going to be your life forever. That's not the life of black folk on my side, because the black folk on my side live lives of comfort knowing that their comrades recognize that they are the victims of systemic injustice. But that's not the community you've chosen. So just like Blair White gets to spend her entire life being thought of as one of the good ones by her community, just like Milo Yiannopoulos got to be one of the good ones of the gays until he was outed as a pedophile, and just like you get to be one of the good ones from your community, you will never rise above the level of tepid acceptance from people who think you're an outlier to your group. But I guess that's enough for some people.
I just have to